Well, thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to see so many MD PhD students all in the same place. That is wonderful. And so I'm Jennifer Kubetta, the director for and I was very honored that the MD PhD executives be hosting it. So I think we're going to do a short presentation and then basically Q&A. So I will turn it over to Aiden to kick things off.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer. As also just thank you to UBURP for having us here. We appreciate it. We're happy to be able to talk to you guys. Jennifer already introduced me. My name is Aiden Levine. I'm a current MD PhD student. I'm in my third year of grad school right now. Maybe the other MD PhDs here also can introduce themselves real quick before we get started.
I'll go first. I'm Megan Sylvester. I just reintegrated back into medical school. So I'm in my third year of medical school now, finished up my PhD in January.
Nice.
I'm going to say Danielle, go next.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Sawyer. I am a third year MD PhD student. I just started the graduate program last year. And so I'm about a year into that, and I work studying DNA damage and repair in the context of cancer.
Awesome. Coco?
Hi everyone, my name is Coco Tarumble and I'm a first year medical student. I'm still just doing the basic science right now in the preclinical years. It's nice to see you all here.
Nice. And then Austin, if you're here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Austin Thompson. I am a fourth year. I just finished up medical school, so I just matched into orthopedic surgery. I'm going to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. Did my PhD back in 2020, so I'm at the very end of everything. So I graduate in about a month, so I'm excited.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, we got a good smattering of different people here. It looks like Julia Morris also popped on as well. Julia, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey guys, sorry I was a little bit late. I'm also in Danielle's year, so I just began grad school as a third year student. I work in the Thorne lab over at the Cancer Center, so my project actually focuses on chemotherapy resistance. So,
nice, awesome. So I hope that gives you guys an idea of who you have talking to you today. This is meant to be very informal. This is very much a Q&A session. The idea behind this was really just to get you guys exposed and to inform you undergrads about what an MD PhD program is. I remember I didn't hear about MD PhD programs until about maybe halfway through my undergrad training. And, you know, it wasn't until then that I was like, oh, this is an option. So, you know, this is sort of meant to be kind of like that for you guys and to let you know about this option and what's going on. So we'll start off with sort of like a very basic question, which is what is an MD PhD program and what is it? So when we say an MD PhD program, what we're talking about is an integrated dual degree program. So it's a program that you apply for, and as a part of you being in the program, you're receiving both your MD and your PhD. The program is you sort of apply to one, and that's what you're doing. You don't have to apply to multiple things. It's just sort of you apply to one thing, and that's what you're doing. And the whole idea behind MD PhD programs is this idea of training physician scientists. So maybe I'll throw it here to my panel of people first, and maybe someone can tell me what they think, or you know, one of my MD PhD people tell me, what do you think a physician scientist is? I can call on people. Danielle, tell me what you think a physician scientist is, Danielle.
Yeah, so I think a physician scientist is kind of at the intersection between research and practicing medicine. And for me, I think that they're really well trained to understand what important clinical questions we want to answer and how best to answer those with the research tools that you learn in your PhD years.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's a perfect explanation. I really like, you know, it is right at that intersection. You are both a physician and a scientist. You're trained to think with both brains, both your physician brain and also your scientist brain. And that's really part of it. And that's, you know, really why we're here to talk to you guys as well, is because a lot of you guys are pre-health students who have shown an interest in science as well. And that's, you know, why I thought this would be interesting for you guys. Now, the part that everyone loves to talk about and that everyone loves to hear is that MD PhD programs are fully funded. And this is really, really the nice part about it. And almost every program that's an MD PhD program is offering full tuition scholarship as well as an annual stipend. And this is, one of the incentives as far as why you might do it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. So I wanted to give you guys just a rundown of what you're looking at in terms of ND PhD programs. AAMC, which is American Academy of Medical Colleges, they list 113 US-based MD PhD programs, 16 Canada-based programs. The majority of these you're going to find at most of your top 100 medical schools. So if you think about where you're thinking for medical school, there's a good chance that they may have an MD PhD program at that school. And class sizes can vary a little bit. Generally, we have 5. I've seen as high as like 15 for class size per year. So it can vary a little bit. And 49 of those 113 schools are NIH funded MD PhD programs. I'm going to talk about what that means in just a sec, but those are referred to as MSTPs. And then just as far as, this past application cycle, like specific numbers, there were just over 2,000 MD PhD applicants that on average applied to like 6 to 7 programs per applicant, with a total acceptance rate of about 35–36%. Which is actually pretty comparable to medical school acceptance rates. I put, average GPA and MCAT. I don't want that to be any sort of thing that's going to dissuade you from applying to an MD PhD program. Don't think that if you don't have a 516 on your MCAT, you can't get in, because that's definitely not the case. That's averages, and just sort of tells you a little bit about what's going on there. But I thought that might be interesting for you guys. Okay, so what is an MSTP? Because I threw out this word already. MSTP stands for a medical scientist training program. And what that means really is that the MD PhD program is funded by the NIH. And for those not as familiar, NIH, National Institute of Health, they're really where all of the major grants in the country for research and research training come from. And, all MSTPs are going to be MD PhD programs. Not all MD PhD programs are necessarily MSTPs. MSTPs are funded by the NIH, so sometimes their funding may be a little bit more comprehensive, but not always. So ultimately with an MSTP, the MD PhD program has to apply for the MSTP from the NIH, and they have to show that they had successful graduations of students and things like that. So to an extent, an MSTP has, a little bit more prestige maybe, because it's showing, okay, here I'm at this program that, has had a history of success as far as students graduating, and, but I wanted to sort of, again, throw it to my panel and say, how much does this really matter? Any thoughts from our current MD PhD students? How much does it really matter for a program to be an MSTP? Any thoughts?
I mean, it's good. It
It's
shows
good.
that there's a really solid training plan in place at that institution. I think that's the biggest piece, is that if NIH is coming in and saying, yes, we think that you have a program designed to train good physician scientists and we're willing to pour money into it, then that's a really good sign about the structure of that program. But when Austin and I started here, we were not an MST funded program, and we still got a really good training plan and educational guidelines. So I don't think that it should be a dissuading factor from applying from a program, but it's not, it is a good thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's well said. I think, it was the same way when I first joined, and we'll talk about our program here a little bit later, but when I first joined the program here, it was not an MSTP, and we only recently became an MSTP, which is very nice. It's nice to be able to say that you go to an MSTP, but it's not necessarily a requirement. So, what does the MD PhD program look like? Well, the majority of MD PhD programs follow this 2-4-2 structure. So you sort of heard us describe where we all are in our training, and some of us mentioned that they reintegrated back into medical school, and that's because of what we do here. So you do your first 2 years for your MS1 and your MS2 year. Then after your MS2 year, and those first 2 years are really your what are called your didactic years, meaning you're doing your book training, you're in classes, you're doing lectures. To see Coco nodding her head, because that's pretty much what she's doing right now. Is just, it's class. You're pretty much going to classes, and that's how things function. And then you go and you do your PhD. And, we say 4 years on average for a PhD. Some people do fewer, some people do a little bit more, but 4 is basically the average. And then when you come, after you finish your PhD, you come back into your MS3 and your MS4 years, which are your clinical years. So that's where you're actually in the hospital, rounding with a team and, seeing patients and things like that. So this structure, it's generally followed by most MD PhD programs in the country. Not every MD PhD program has this exact one, but this is the general way that they tend to be set up. And the funding doesn't really matter for you guys that much at this point, but it'll vary a little bit where the funding comes from, but there's always going to be funding for MD PhD students. So why do it? I just described to you guys an 8-year-long graduate degree. You may be thinking like, why would I want to do 8 more years of school? And I'll throw it here to my panel as well. But some reasons I listed here. Strong interest in medicine and laboratory sciences. I hope that describes some of you here in our audience. You want to practice translational medicine. Translational medicine is kind of what Danielle was talking about, where it's right at that intersection of you can move things from bench to bedside, as they say, meaning from the laboratory into the clinic, actually. If you know that you want to do medicine, but you have a really, really strong interest in research, or say that you want to go into academia and you want to be in academic medicine. But what else? What are maybe some reasons that I might have missed here, or if any other thoughts that you guys have from our current students?
Those are all pretty good reasons, but other things I just kind of want to make sure you note is that it's not, if you really think you want to do anything else but this, I would consider that. It's a long road, so you want to make sure that at the end of it, you would go back and say, yeah, I would definitely do that over again. It's not something that there's a lot of time and effort, and it's a lot of your life that you're contributing to this. So like Aiden already said, don't do it for just the tuition stipend. That's not worth it. In the long run, it's not going to be that much money. Other things too to consider is that you're going to run into a lot of MD onlys that do great basic science and great translational science. You don't necessarily need the PhD, but the PhD part gives you formal training in how to do basic science or how to do whatever type of science. It's a great thing as like a way to build a toolkit. If you're really self-motivated and really want to put the time in, I know plenty of MDs that do phenomenal research that never got formal PhD training. So it's just something to consider. Like we just want to be completely, transparent with you guys that this training style is more of a way to build a tool set and a way to build a toolkit for you to become become whatever you want to be in the future. And ideally, that is a physician scientist.
That's great. I list here as well some less good reasons, which are still reasons, but they're not the good reasons. So like Austin said, and like I said as well, doing it for the money, it's nice. All of us are gonna end medical school with we're not gonna have debt from medical school, which is very, very nice. At the same time, though, there are studies that have looked at actual financial outcomes, and it doesn't really make much of a difference in the long run. If you consider the fact that you're going to be spending an additional 4 years doing your PhD, whereas you could be just getting right out into the workforce and being part of the medical class. So, that's not a great reason. It is a reason. It goes into consideration, but it's not a great reason. Doing it for the prestige, that's never going to be a good reason to do something. But I would shy away from saying, oh, well, I have my PhD also, so I'm therefore much better. I've also sometimes heard people say this, and I think this ties into what Austin was saying. I've heard people say, well, I don't really know what if I really want to do medicine or if I really want to do research. So I kind of want to keep my doors open and know, what am I going to do down the line? And I think that ties into what Austin was saying as far as you want to be committed to this. This is going to be something, it's going to have a lot of trials, and it's going to test you along the way, and it's going to be a long run. And so you need to make sure that, if you're just doing this because you're like, I just want to keep my doors open, it maybe isn't as a good reason to do it. Okay, so, what can you do your PhD in? I think that's a good question to ask. And the truth is almost anything, at least here at the University of Arizona, definitely almost anything. It can vary by university where they, what exactly they want you to do. And, almost always health sciences, anything health sciences relevant is going to be allowed. I'm doing my PhD in pharmacology. Megan's doing her PhD or did her PhD in physiology. Danielle, you're in CMM, is that correct? No, what are you in? I'm sorry.
Cancer biology.
Cancer biology, I'm sorry. And then Coco, do you know what you're going into?
I'm leaning towards maybe pharmacology or like establishing a connection between like epidemiology or biostatistics.
That's right. You're interested in like public health almost a little bit. Yeah. Julia, what are you doing?
I am both CMM is my primary department, and then I have a minor in CBio, so
Good.
Also cancer biology.
Good. Yeah. CMM is cellular molecular medicine for those people not as familiar. And then Austin, can tell us.
I did my PhD in pharmacology.
Austin has a PhD in pharmacology. So, where most of us are pretty health sciences relevant, I think. I'll say though, there are people in our program who are doing like optical sciences, who are doing more like biomedical engineering type stuff. And you can really build your own sort of style of PhD as well of what you want to be doing. Always talk with your program directors as well and see what you can do. And I'll mention as well, your choice of PhD can affect your time to degree completion. So, the truth of it is, when you go to do your PhD, you're going to try to transfer some credits over from your medical school. So you're going to try to get as many basically classes of PhD work waived as possible, and that will vary based off of what you do your PhD in. If you are like Austin and myself and do your PhD in pharmacology, you learn a lot of pharmacology in medical school. So there's a fair amount of classes that get waived. If you do your PhD in optical sciences, there's not a lot of medical school classes on optical sciences. So you're going to have to take a fair number of courses in order to do that PhD. So just, bear in mind, sometimes that does play into, how long do you really want your PhD to take? And do you want to try to get out of here sooner than later? So, okay, so that's a lot of the background. Yes.
Aiden, can I make a quick note on that? So something to consider when you're looking at MD PhD programs across the country is there are some schools that are less focused on kind of the basic science PhDs. Our program, just historically, we've placed students the most in kind of basic science realms. Coco would be our first to go into more of the public health realm. But I know a lot of MD PhD programs where basically all of their students are public health based. So that's something that you can kind of look at when you're looking at a program of what departments are most of their students funneling into, and just recognize that. And if you have a known interest, maybe you kind of gear the schools you're applying for in that sense.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. Yeah, so what does it take to apply? Sort of jumping ahead now, it's sort of if you guys decide you wanted to do. So one of the things that I think is very, very nice is when applying to medical schools through AMCAS, which is, the system you use to apply, you pretty much only have to check a box in order to say, yes, consider me for the MD PhD program at this school. And it'll require you to do an additional personal statement. If you're going to do an MD PhD application, you should have a personal statement saying, why you want to do an MD PhD. They may ask you for an additional, shorter statement as well, just, relevant to why their school's MD PhD. But it's generally not that much additional work, I think, on the application side. One of the things as well that is very, very nice is when you apply, you can have them consider you for sort of an either or kind of scenario where you can tell the school, hey, I want you to consider me for your MD PhD program, but I also want you to consider me for just your MD program. And I thought that this was nice when I was applying because it made me feel almost like I was doubling the number of applications that I was sending out, because it was basically every school that I applied to, it was both the MD PhD program and also the MD program. So you can really double up sometimes on the schools. I say as well here, it's good to have a letter of recommendation from a lab that you worked in. So for all of you UBURP students here, if you're doing summer research, you're going to be working in a lab. It'd be great if you can get a letter of rec from your lab's PI and actually get them to write your letter of recommendation. That'll be very good for your application. Prereqs are the same as for medical school. So a common question is whether or not you need to take the GRE. because you're doing a PhD. There's no need. I've really yet to come across a program that makes you take the GRE. I can't think of any. It's possible, but really not likely. I say here, confirm with the program website. You should always confirm with program websites before you apply to your programs. But really, to apply to an MD PhD program, you just need to take the MCAT as if you were just going to do medical school. You don't need to be taking the GRE as well. And again, another question for our panel, aside from the things we've already mentioned, letter of rec from your PI, your personal statement, what are some other things that go into being a good, strong applicant for an MD PhD program?
I think I'm going to have Danielle and Austin answer this too, because they've both served on our admissions committee as well, reviewing applicants. But I think for me, it's really showing that passion for science. It's really easy to just participate in a lab and say that you have the research experience, but showing that you are really an active member and being able to show up and talk about your research and answer some basic questions just to show that you were highly involved in your projects. I think that's one of the things I look for a lot. But I don't know, Danielle and Austin, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I completely agree. When I look at applications, it really comes through when you're writing, like, first off, when you're looking at written applications, it really comes through who's spent time actually doing significant work in the lab and made actual contributions. It doesn't necessarily have to be papers, but, poster presentations or whatever. If you have papers, that really shows that you've done something. So that's always great to get your name on a paper if possible. And other than that, when you're interviewing, the things I look for is making sure that they actually can speak about what they did intelligently. There's a lot of people that can write, you can write anything down on an application and it can look fantastic, but if you can't talk about it, and every interview you go on is going to make you talk about your research. If you're applying for this, it's a big part of the interview, is you have to know your stuff inside and out about all the projects you worked on that you listed on your application, because they're going to ask you about it and they're going to dig deep because they want to make sure that you actually know what you're talking about. And like you said, when you talk to someone about anything on an interview, passion really comes through. If you can tell if someone really enjoyed what they did, and you can tell if someone really is, just like whatever about something, whether that's research or, anything you put on your application. So make sure if you put something on an application, this applies for all across the board, make sure it's something that's actually meaningful to you and that you can speak with like a strong conviction. Because if you can't, it's not worth putting on there because they'll ask you about it. And and people can read right through someone that's lackluster or not really, passionate about what they're doing.
I would agree with everything that Aiden and Austin have said, but I think it's also important to consider. So there's kind of like a general guideline that people talk about as far as how many years of research experience you should have, which is like 2 years. But for me, 2 years can look very different from one applicant to another, depending on what they're actually doing in the lab, how many hours every week they're spending in the lab. So I kind of don't like to use that as a gauge. But I think, having ownership over some portion of a project, maybe a figure that you contribute to, or, it's not necessarily going to be, an entire paper that you published on your own, but maybe you'll own like a figure or two in a paper. And I think that's a really good goal for, yourself as you're applying. And I think the other thing that schools are really moving towards lately is considering fit within their own program, whether or not they have enough options of PIs that are going to be in a field that you're interested in. So I think that's really important to consider when you're applying to different programs, making sure that you're a good fit.
Yeah.
Can I hop in really quick?
Absolutely, please.
Okay. One thing I also want to say, don't let people scare you away saying that you have to take gap years before you apply. It can definitely help your application, and if that is the right choice for you, absolutely do it. But if you have experience from undergrad, don't feel like that isn't enough to get into an MD PhD program. If you're making solid contributions to your lab, regardless of whether you're a full-time research assistant after graduation or during your undergrad years, that's still a contribution. So I just want to put that out there because I had a lot of people tell me that there was no way I was going to get in because I didn't take gap years, but obviously here I am. So don't let people scare you away. And also, as someone who does recruitment and I also read applications for the med school, you can't forget about being passionate about the medical side as well, because as much as we're interested in knowing that you're going to be a good fit and really follow through on the science side, you have to make sure that you equally have a passion for clinical medicine, because if you're going to do both, you have to love both, especially when you're spending 8 years to do the training for it.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for all that input. Yeah, I'll just say, to tack on to that, it's always good to look at the schools ahead of time. This is advice for anything, but it ties into what Megan was saying as far as programs and what PhDs are available, and what Danielle was saying as far as fit, right? If you know that you really, really want to go do your PhD in neuroscience, think about and look at schools that have good neuroscience PhD programs, and look at that sort of thing, and that's how you sort of find that fit. And if you don't have to know what you want to do your PhD in necessarily ahead of time, but it's good to know, like, oh, I'm applying to University X. They have a very strong program in, these fields. So, it'd be good of me to go in there and say that I'm interested in those fields because those are the ones that they're good with. So just sort of things to keep in mind when you're applying to programs. We've already sort of been talking about interviewing, so we don't need to go as much into it. But logistically, interviews for MD PhDs typically take an additional day. Like we've been saying, you have to apply to the MD side of things, and you need to be applying to the dual degree side of things. So you'll typically have one day of your interview week, which is just do the MD stuff, just everything that all the standard medical applicants will do. And then you'll have another day of that interview weekend where you'll likely meet with faculty, meet with the program directors of the MD PhD program, and you'll do some research type interviews and do that sort of stuff. And that's where, like Austin was saying, very commonly, if you have listed 2 or 3 papers on your CV, on your application, they're going to ask you about those papers, and that's where they're going to ask you about what did you do with this, like what did you do on this project, what were your contributions, how much time were you spending, stuff like that.
Really fast, I want to just endorse, you all are UBURP students, so you have these skills to talk about your research. I know you do. You're being trained of how to do that. So we're not trying to scare you into thinking that this day of interviews where you have to talk about your science is going to be super overwhelming. It's just a way you can prepare. Sit down with your PIs, sit down with other people in your lab and talk through your projects, and just be ready to answer those questions. But you guys are already developing those skills, which is awesome.
So I'll clarify really quick too. We do definitely have UBURP students here, but we have some who are not, but definitely people can be involved in labs in other ways, just so you know.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, in general, it's really good to look at the papers that you're going to list, or look at, even if you just have poster presentations that you're going to list on your application. If some of them, sometimes you list like a poster presentation that was from like 2 or 3 years ago, and you're like, I haven't thought about that project in forever. It's a good idea to go back and look at that again and just make sure that you can talk about it, because but yeah, it's practicing with your lab, practicing with your friends. Just have your friend ask you about your paper and just talk with them about it. It doesn't have to be super scientific and analytical the way you talk about it. It's almost better if you're kind of conversational in the way that you talk about your work and that sort of thing. We've already been talking about interviewing. So what about like the decision-making side of things? Because, say, you guys apply, you interview, you come down to it, you got, 3 programs that you want, or that want you to come and be part of their MD PhD programs. How do you make that decision? So I think this is a good sort of panel opportunity. So what are some things that went into your decision-making, current MD PhD students?
I am a big proponent of making sure you choose somewhere you want to live. Especially as an MD PhD student, you are choosing a place that you're going to live at for 7 to 9 years. So yes, you need to find the program that's a good fit for you, but you also need to find the city and the environment that's the best fit for you. So that was a big factor that I looked at in programs of where do I want to live.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just double that. That's something you need to make in consideration no matter what. Like, it can make or break what you're doing. If you're miserable somewhere, I don't care how good the program is, you're going to be a miserable student. You're not going to perform well. So you want to make sure you're happy wherever you're at. So definitely take a long, hard look at where you'll be moving to. What kind of support system will you have there? Another big thing, which is harder to know, unless you really want to know where you're going, is what, like, the funding situation. That's where the MSTP thing can come into play. What kind of funding mechanisms are available for you? The last thing you want to do is run out of money, or the program to run out of the money halfway through your PhD or whatever. You're not funded anymore, and that can kind of be an issue. So that's why the MSTP thing can be useful. I know it's not necessarily the end all be all, and it's not usually a huge issue for programs that have these long established MD PhD programs, but you want to make sure that they're well enough funded to support you through your entire time. Just something to consider, especially when you get in.
Yeah. I don't know, what Coco, you're our most recent student. What went into your decision?
Just reiterating what like Austin had said, like I'm born and raised in Tucson, Arizona, so having a support system here was a really big factor. It's always nice having someone to go home to, like, to get like your laundry done if you're like stressed out, or you get a home cooked meal, so that's always helpful. And just like reiterating, if you know that you like the sunshine, pick somewhere that has the sunshine. Because I went to undergrad in Brandeis University in Massachusetts, and it was very, very cold. And just know that weather has a really big impact, especially when you're stressed and studying all the time.
Yeah. Thank you, Coco. I think that's great. And yeah, I mean, I'll say as well, you know, even though we are here on behalf of the University of Arizona MD PhD program, all of you University of Arizona MD or undergrads should really think, you know, do you want to spend another 8 years here? And I think, you know, if you were admitted to our program, it's worth considering. And I mean that in a good way and a bad way. There are great things about Tucson. There's great reasons to stay here in Tucson for another 8 years. At the same time, you know, you may not want to be here for another 8 years, and that's fine. So, you know, keep those things in mind. And I think location really plays into decision making a lot. Location is really a big part. The rest of it all sort of falls into place. And especially, you know, if you find a good PhD program that you like and it's in the location that you like, I think it'll all fall into place. Something that I'll say, just to sort of tack onto that, because what I just said was, you know, you find a PhD program that you like. I didn't really say anything about finding an MD program that you like. And, you know, you'll come to your own conclusions about this as you go through the application cycle and interviewing and things like that. But one thing that I learned from interviewing at a ton of MD PhD programs was that medical school is medical school, and medical school is going to be pretty much the same no matter where you go. And I don't think that aspect of it really plays into a lot of the decision making for most MD PhD students. Not a lot of MD PhD students go, oh, well, this is a top ranked medical school, so I'm going to go to this MD PhD program. That really isn't what plays into it a lot of the time. It's more, you know, is there a PhD here that I want to do? And is the PhD program right? And is this where I want to be? And the medical school is going to be medical school. It's standardized training no matter where you go for the most part at this point. So that was my takeaway. So, like I said, we are coming here not completely unbiased. I'm here, you know, we are here on behalf of our program. So one thing that's really great and kind of cool about the University of Arizona is there are technically 2 MD PhD programs with the University of Arizona. So we here are, we're all students at the College of Medicine Tucson, MSTP. So we're part of the medical scientist training program here. Our program has about 35 current students in it, and we take 5 students a year. So if you think about it, that's basically like spread out over 7 years. We pretty much have 5 students in each cohort currently, and that's about where we are. We do have plans to expand our program though, and the hope is to continue to expand on that class size. It's possible maybe some of the younger students here, it would be slightly larger than 5 by the time you apply. There's also, and I want to note this because there are basically our sister program, the College of Medicine Phoenix has its own MD PhD program. It's technically separate, but we do interact with them and we do a fair amount of stuff with them. It's a smaller program, still sort of a growing program. They have 7 current students and they take 2 per year. But this is just to say that this option is out here, and this is an option for you guys. And really, this is something that I would hope that you would potentially take advantage of in applying to, since you're at your home university. Both programs, this is just to highlight this, we're an MSTP, but they're an MD PhD program. Both programs are fully funded. Both programs have funding, scholarship, and stipend. So in that aspect, it doesn't really make much of a difference there. It's kind of just program size in terms of difference between our programs at this point. And then I point this out as well, just a little bit of self-advertising a little bit. So our current stipend, so this is would be your annual salary basically, is $27,500, which is pretty nice here in Tucson. It's a pretty solid stipend to live off here in Tucson. I think most of us feel that we're very comfortable in our living situations and what's going on with all that.
One thing to take into consideration or looking at programs around the country is that, especially MSTP programs, since they are NIH funded, it's about the same amount of money for all the programs from the NIH, regardless of where you are in the country. So if you go to the MSTP in Stanford, your money goes a lot less of a way than it does in Tucson. So considering cost of living and how that plays into everything, if that plays in at all for you, is something to consider as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Considering, do you want to, there, say at like UCSF, MSTPs still are living in like student housing because you can't afford a house in San Francisco. So, that does play into it for sure. And what you want to be doing and what, your living scenario is going to be like. Like Austin said, it doesn't vary too much from around the 27,000, 28,000 mark in terms of stipends around the country. So it's pretty much where it's at. So, what makes our MSTP special? We are here a little bit to advertise to you guys. One of the things that's really special about our program is we're very student driven. We're a very, very student run program. We're all here today talking to you as students, where there's no program directors here talking to you guys. So we have our committee structure in which we have sort of our executive board, and then we have our admissions and our recruitment. We talked about, students here today, read applications and are responsible for admissions, which is really great. We also have a retreat committee. So we every year take a retreat over the summer before the start of the year. Normally last year it was at a resort. A couple of years ago, it was at a lodge kind of up in Mount Lemon. And 2 years ago, obviously, because of COVID, couldn't happen. But the retreat is a really great part of our program. It's really special. And then another thing I highlight is our colloquium and continuity series. So this is a monthly meeting. The colloquium side of it is typically we'll have a faculty speaker come and talk to us. Just a good chance for all the MD PhDs to get together, hear from a current MD PhD or a current physician scientist about what they're doing. And then the continuity side of it is to sort of keep all of the PhD students still active in their medical education and making sure we still understand what's going on in terms of the medicine side of things. Yeah, anything to add from our current students about what you like about our MSTP?
Just that I realize we talked about choosing a place you want to live, but also choose the people you want to train with. And you get a really good sense of this over your interview days, similar as you're interviewing for MD only programs. Just look around the room, see the people that are attracted to that program and get a sense of their people that you want to train side by side, because it's amazing how those gut feelings usually are correct. Yeah.
Cool. So, that was pretty much a little presentation for you guys. I mostly just wanted to go over basics of MD PhD programs and what's going on and all that sort of stuff. We got some time still here, so just wanted to open up the floor. I don't think we really need to break into breakout rooms, but I'll see. But if people have questions, please put questions in chat or chime up, and we will happily answer them. And if you want a specific one of us to answer questions, just let us know who you want to answer.
And you can raise your hand as well. That'll help us to see you.
Yeah, you can raise hands as well.
Go for it, Noah.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I guess I was wondering just a little bit, could you talk a little more about the process of like proposing a topic for your PhD? Because I didn't know this, I just learned this from you guys, that you kind of have a little bit of freedom to choose the topic of your PhD. I thought it was, very strictly like medical related, 100%. So yeah, like what is kind of the process for that, at least at U of A?
Who wants to take it? I feel like I talked a lot. Austin, go.
Sure. So yeah, you really do have the freedom to kind of do whatever PhD. And when we say about proposing a topic, I think you might be meaning like picking a program, which is a little bit different. So you will do both of. So picking a program involving like whether you want to do like Aiden I did in pharmacology or Megan did it in physiology. These are all different graduate programs within the whatever colleges. But there's also, public health, there's optical sciences. So it's picking essentially a PhD training program. It's just a graduate program that you would pick. And you kind of feel that out based on, typically you fill that out when you're looking for mentors. So you find out what your scientific interests are. And then during your first 2 years of medical school or during whatever time period at whatever school you're at, they allow you to pick mentors. And when you're rotating through labs, you kind of find what your scientific interests are. You reach out to PIs that might be interested in being able to fund you and host you as a PhD student. And then you usually will just go into whoever lab you decide to pick. Say, you go in with Professor X, but they're in the department of whatever, they're in the department of physiology. So therefore you can kind of, then you'd probably go into their graduate program. And then if you mean proposing a topic, that's kind of on you. You kind of go into the lab, they do certain things you're interested in, then you kind of pick a topic for your thesis after that and your dissertation work. If that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I will say too, Noah, some of that does depend on the MD PhD program. So our program up in Phoenix only has one PhD program. It's, guys, what is it called? I don't remember. It'll come to me. But they only have one PhD program that they place their MD PhD students in. But you still have a wide variety of potential PIs that have a lot of different subspecialties of their research. They just have the one PhD program that they join up with. So some of that depends on the program and how it's structured.
A couple of chat questions, it looks like.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So question from Sage about time to undergraduate completion. So, whether or not we all completed our undergrad in 4 years and whether or not that really matters. Megan, raising your hand.
Well, I'm saying I did it in 5 because I changed my mind. I changed my mind a lot.
Okay.
I also took gap year.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I finished mine in 4.5. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
No one's going to know how long you took.
Yeah, Danielle.
Yeah, I'll just chime in. So I am the first in my family to go to a university and get a 4-year degree. And I actually attended junior college for about 5 years before transferring to Davis and completing my undergraduate bachelor's degree. And then took 2 gap years before applying to programs. So I think that, an upward trend in, grades and GPA and such, and, really fulfilling those experiences are probably more important than how long it takes you to complete, your schooling and education. And I think I grew a lot in the process. And I think that really helped me when I applied.
I just want to say, so I actually was on admissions committee and interviewed Danielle when she was applying to our program. And all of those factors that she just talked about were actually some of the reasons why we loved her for our program, because it showed her persistence and her grit and her dedication to this training process. So sometimes the longer path shows a lot more of those character traits that not everyone can develop in only 4 years. And some people do, and that's fantastic. But don't think that that's a hindrance. I think that there's a lot of growth that comes from kind of twisty, twirly paths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. We had another question about, generally, kind of a general requirement of grad school maybe is that you shouldn't go where you did your undergrad. I'll chime in first about this and just say, I don't think it's necessarily true. Sometimes the thing that I hear about with regards to that piece of advice is not, especially not staying in the same department. That say you did lab work in a department, especially if you did a department, on main campus, I would, when you come here, don't go back to that same department. Probably pick a different department would be my advice. But I know Austin, you are an undergrad here.
Yeah. I don't really understand where this like idea that you can't go to the same graduate school as you went to undergrad, because how many medical students do we have in our class that went to the University of Arizona?
Yeah, a ton of medical students.
It's probably more than half. And that's probably true for most of my friends that have gone to medical school around the country. You'd say at least half of the students probably went to the same undergrad as they went to medical school. So I don't think, I think that's something that, I remember when I was an undergrad, I heard that as well, but I don't think that's definitely not something that people look at. And if you look at a place like U of A, for example, or a lot of the public medical schools, so that would include all the, the UC schools, all those places, they actually have requirements to accept a certain percentage of in-state students. So it's actually sometimes almost beneficial to be an in-state student for public schools, because a lot of them get state funding, and as a requirement of the state funding, they have to accept at least a certain percentage of in-state people. And I know that's true for the University of Arizona, and it's true for, most public colleges that receive state tuition funding.
Yeah. Any other thoughts about staying at your undergrad university for grad school?
I completely agree with Austin. I'm not really sure where you'll hear the exact same thing about doing residency at the place you did medical school and doing fellowship at the same place you did residency. I don't know what that rhetoric is. Choose the place you want to train. That's going to make you the happiest at the end of the day.
Exactly. I think that's exactly true.
Yeah.
And you're going to find that a lot of people, when you come to the residency places, end up staying where they trained for either familiarity standpoints or other reasons.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, thoughts. So maybe we can all say, I think, what are all of our plans for after graduation? Like, what are all of us plan on doing with, I know, Coco, you're like coming your first year. What do you think you're gonna do? So I have a really strong interest in academic medicine. I really love teaching. It's one of the things that I think is like one of my things that I try to stick to. I plan on hopefully going to a strong teaching hospital for my residency, and then potentially staying there if it's a good research place, and trying to become faculty. That would be my sort of projected trajectory, hopefully, once I graduate.
Do you want to run your own lab, Aiden?
Yeah, I would like to have a lab. Thank you.
Yeah, well, because, All right, Go next, Austin. You're the closest to this reality.
I'm the closest to this reality. So I'll be graduating in May, and I'm starting residency here in July. So I'm doing orthopedic surgery, which is generally not much of an thought of, as most MD PhDs do not go into orthopedic surgery. But my research was focused mostly on orthopedic pain. So I'm kind of interested in understanding that from a better level. And as a surgeon, it's a little bit different doing research. Your time commitments are a lot more constrained. So my goals are to kind of link up and run a translational lab and kind of be more of a head person writing grants and letting, hiring PhD scientists and other scientists to kind of do the day-to-day work while I would do the funding for it. That's kind of my standpoint, and, helping with that kind of aspect of things. That's what I've seen. So I'm actually very excited to go to the Mayo Clinic, because there's just huge amounts of physician scientists that work there and such collaborative work. So I've already hooked up with a couple of labs to work with. The head of the vice chair of research for the Mayo Clinic is an orthopedic surgeon, actually. And I'm working with his lab. So that's kind of, I'm getting some good mentorship to see how it works to become a surgeon scientist.
My answer is very similar to Austin. I'm most interested in OBGYN, which is a surgical subspecialty as well. And it is not a field that MD PhDs typically go into. There's maybe like 1 or 2 research-based residencies out there in OBGYN, which is wild, because I feel like women's health, we've got these huge gaps in basic science and preclinical knowledge. I don't think I want to truly run my own lab. Like Austin said, I think I want to be more of a collaborator, kind of teaming up with the PhD scientists and running more of a joint research type program. But that could change. We'll see.
For me, I am super interested in oncology. Obviously, I'm in the cancer biology PhD program, but I'm kind of gaining a new interest in radiation oncology. I did some shadowing this week, and I found it really exciting and kind of innovative, and it seemed like a really great place to be doing research. Yeah, but I hope to, I think I'm kind of in between either collaboration or having my own lab. I don't think I've quite decided. And I think that's what the PhD years are going to hopefully help me parse out. So hopefully I'll have an update for you guys soon.
Great,
And for
Coco,
me-
let's hear it.
All right. So I'm interested in Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease research. So my focus is hopefully end goal running like clinical trials and maybe like merging biotech and clinical work in it. So like having a clinic and a lab and using the problems in the clinic to dictate what research goes on to improve outcomes. But it's all up in the air since I'm still a first year.
Yeah.
We're holding you to that word for word. You're not allowed to change your mind now.
Exactly. There was a question about undergraduate GPAs. I don't know if any of us really know what our undergraduate GPAs really were at this point.
I have no idea.
Yeah. I can say, like, I don't think my undergrad GPA necessarily improved throughout every single year. I tried to make sure that my science GPA was very good, and I tried to focus on that. And then I found, like, my senior year, I took a bunch of like random classes and didn't necessarily do great in all of them. So, you know, they may ask you, you know, GPA stuff is always tricky, and like I don't like to, you know, put an exact number on things like that. But science GPA is important. I'll say that. Like, it's important to have a good GPA for, and that's just medical school in general. You know, you need to have done pretty well in OChem and done pretty well in you know, your basic bio classes and things like that. I don't know. Any other thoughts on GPA?
I think showing improvement is definitely a great thing. When we're on, I like looking at applications from students. I've seen all the gamut of, you know, people that start off with like below 3.0s in their freshman year, and then, you know, by the end or by junior, senior year, they're 4.0 students. So I think one thing that a lot of medical schools and MD PhD programs look at in general is not just like what your total overall GPA is, but, you know, obviously it has to be above some threshold. There's going to be that threshold, but they want to see improvement. If it is not the, like, you know, if you're not a 4.0 student or not like you have a stellar GPA, the next thing you're going to look at is, okay, well, did this person improve year over year? And if that's the case, they'll more likely, you know, be like, okay, this person obviously improved. And, you know, people can have bad GPAs for any reason. There's a lot of things that go on outside of school that affect your GPA in your life. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it. Showing improvement is the most important.
Yeah.
There's also the option to continue taking classes after undergrad. You could do a master's degree if there's something that you feel like you need that slight boost in your GPA in order to show that improvement, as Austin said. I don't push people to do a master's degree just to get into medical school. That's a whole separate conversation we could have. But if that is a time where you need that little bit of academic growth, master's degrees are a great way to do that and get a little bit more research experience.
Are there medical specialties that MD PhDs gravitate towards or don't really gravitate towards? You know, like Megan and Austin already sort of said, surgical stuff isn't as common. And I think reason for that is because you're doing surgery all the time and because you can't really have a lab necessarily. But what are some other ones that do take or do have more or don't have as many, do you guys think?
Anything internal med, subspecialty, so your cardiology, your pulmonology, pediatrics, any subspecialty of pediatrics is a huge research field. There's tons of research residency tracks in pediatrics. Neurology is going to be a huge one.
Neurosurgery actually is too for the surgical subspecialties. There's a lot of MD PhDs that go into neurosurgery. Granted, it's a little bit different, but you'll see a lot. I'm not sure exactly why that is, Not like they're any less busy than any other. They're probably more busy than most surgical subspecialties, but there is a high concentration of MD PhDs in neurosurgery. But radiology is another big one. Radiology and interventional radiology, huge numbers, and there's such ample areas for research. A lot of biomedical engineers, because there's always ways, to fix their magnets or do whatever the radiologists do.
Yeah, I think, a lot of it, I think, comes down to where are the question areas? And every medical specialty is going to have question areas. Like every medical specialty has questions that still aren't answered and that there will be room for research to be done. But I think, yeah, it comes down to just what do you think you can do research in, and what do you think you have, an interest in doing, and where do you think you're going to land that, you'll have all these questions that you want to answer, I think is I think what a lot of what comes down to it, but it can be anything.
Pick your specialty based on what your clinical interests are, not necessarily your research interests. That's a huge thing. No matter what, unless you want to go full research and that's all you want to do, which some people do, you're going to have an aspect of your career that is clinical. And sometimes it's going to, and then more often than not, it's going to be a larger proportion of your time, regardless if you're internal med or not. Your clinical life is going to bleed over into your research time, even if you have protected research time, just from talking with a lot of MD PhDs or physician scientists in general. So if you pick a specialty, make sure it's a clinical specialty that you're interested in. Don't pick something based on the research, because you can make the research whatever you want. It's always nice to have those things blend together. But I mean, I've met physician scientists that, they're practicing neurologists and they do completely different types of research in their lab. It's not common, but it happens. So pick the specialty. This is way down the road for you guys, but pick a specialty that's actually interesting to you clinically, because if you hate your clinical work, that's like the big thing. Because honestly, at the end of the day, who's employing you is going to be academic institutions. And they're going to get money, not necessarily from your research, they get money from your clinical practice. And they're going to make you do more clinical time, and they're going to try and force you to do more clinical time. This is just something you can consider way down the road.
Yeah. I think that's good though. What kind of advice would we give for someone who's in high school, someone who's not even in undergraduate yet?
Dude, you're intense. I did not know what I was doing as a sophomore in high school. I mean, just keep at it. I don't know. What advice do we have, guys?
I would say, try to think about, because at this point, you still have college to think about. And if you're really serious, if at this point you really want to be thinking, I want to do, going into an MD PhD program, just think about colleges where you'd be happy going to do research then, because I think, you want to do some sort of laboratory research. And so if you're really trying to get your foot in the door, start thinking about where, or, you could look at some labs even really, if you wanted to, and think about that from that point of view of things, and thinking about the research side of things. We're very early. If you're thinking about it right now, good for you, honestly, good for you. Cause I was, like I said, I didn't even think about it until halfway through my undergraduate.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I think it's really important when you're considering, there's kind of like categories of experiences that you'll probably want to kind of check out as you're applying to MD PhD programs, like research, volunteer, clinical type work. But it's really so important that you find experiences that you're genuinely excited about, and not as like a check off this box kind of experience. And I think that's really important as you're going through your undergrad career eventually, that you really gravitate towards experiences that you love, because it comes across in your application when you're doing things because you love them versus when you're doing things just because somebody told you to. And also, I will say that 90% of the advice that other pre-med students give you is total crap. So literally don't listen to them. Just don't. That's my best advice.
That's perfect.
I think on that lovely note, it's exactly 6. And thank you all for putting your contact information in the chat. and for inviting everyone to reach out to you individually if they have more questions. So if you're visiting with us, please check the chat. I will also take this recording and post it on the site. We have a community tab, and underneath that, you'll see seminars and panels. And so I'll put this on there as well, and you can feel free to share with friends or review as you'd like. So,
Awesome.
but I don't want to take time. So thank you so much for doing this. Yay to all of our panelists. And thank you all of you who are visiting for taking time to come hang out and listen.
Yes, and thank you to you, Jennifer, for helping to organize this.
No problem at all. I'll be happy to do it again sometime when you guys would like.
Perfect.
All right,
Awesome.
sounds good. Thank you so much.